What's up there, Workforce? Chris here with Work to Game, and welcome to another community feedback with many of those this week. Just keep in mind, those are the yellow bubble in the corner, so if you don't want to see videos like that from us, the little yellow bubble tells you it's community feedback. It even tells you which face is going to be in the video. So keep an eye there, and let's talk about this, our most recent podcast with Meoni, talking about Final Fantasy, looking into 2020. If you're not familiar with Meoni, he's an incredible creator. I want to pull up his live subscriber count at the time of my recording of this, because he has been getting so close to 50,000. I want to have like the exact count. It says 49,500. I think it only updates by full hundreds. So he is somewhere in that like last 500 subscribers. So at the time of this recording, I would say, you know, if you're not familiar with him, if you're not subscribed to his channel, he's an incredible creator. He has many things we can aspire to have in our own content, such as really great accents. And he does a great job covering all things Final Fantasy, as well as he's expressed interest in other games and stuff in things past. So it's just a great time to go say hello to a new creator and congratulate him on the huge milestone that 50,000 can be. So let's jump into our first comment. I don't know if that's AI or Al, but on the homogenization, I feel most people miss buffs, a la Stone Skin, Cleric Stance, etc. I personally miss enmity abilities, such as Smoke on Ninja, to the point of WoW. I used to love the feel of raid buffs, Amplify Magic. If you had to upkeep buffs, it's a minor thing, but it makes you feel more involved, I think. Leveling up in Heavensward as a white mage. I loved Swift Cast, Stone Skin 2 before every pull. I do think that at first it seems like a quality of life to not have to just buff up every time, and it's just clicking a button. But I do think that, the whole game is really just pressing buttons and keys. So if you remove too many of those, the game can feel pruned down to the point where it's like, well, then why am I even playing? So we see that. You reference WoW. I think the difference between like WoW Retail and WoW Classic shows us that all those quality of life things over time end up resulting in two very different games, because that's really how we got Retail. Most of its changes were them trying to improve the content and add quality of life, and they've added things and added things and added things until they are unrecognizable as iterations on each other. So yeah, I think there's something nice about having to buff up, about that focus, like that mental state of like, we're about to pull. I do like that. And I would love to see them kind of go back to that. I liked cross-class skills way back when you used to have to like level another job to get access to all of your skills. I think that there's something nice about kind of rewarding people for understanding the intricacies of a battle system instead of making it so easy. The far end of that being like the PvP battle system right now, where you almost take it down to like an arcade level, like a fighter level, where you have so few abilities, like old school Guild Wars. So I prefer the complexity personally. It gives me something to learn, something to master, but I understand why they make the changes. So I hopefully they're making the decision that is best for the community long term and satisfies the most players, even if that's not me and not you. But it's interesting to kind of see where this will go with 6.0, which we'll start knowing more about next November. A year from now, we'll start kind of thinking about that, and by then we'll have fleshed out our relic system. We'll have seen the more thoughts on what the limited job system means to them with Blue Mage, and we'll have started, coming out of Ultimate, we're now getting a feel for like, what is the state of the battle system, and what is the state of the balance of classes, and what is the new true 5.x meta, because Ultimate, in my opinion, really kind of helps set that, since it is the hardest content we get. I kind of think that like that really sets the kind of ceiling for each class, each job. So I don't know. Thank you. Thought it was interesting. Paul, They need to adopt a WoW classic style of crafting with cool recipes that drop from dungeons and crafted gear that's relevant for in-game content. So there's kind of two parts to comparing crafting between WoW and Final Fantasy XIV. I think we may have talked about this in the past. There may even be a video on it. But crafting in general in WoW is basically open up your crafting log. If you have the materials, click it. It's a load bar. It's successful. Crafting in 14, simply put, is a mini turn-based game where you basically have the equivalent of a life bar, and you have that many turns to finish the craftsmanship, to complete it. And then you have a secondary bar to determine whether or not it's high quality. So without failing the top bar, you want to get the bottom bar as high as possible. And simply put, that's your crafting system. Now, from an unlock standpoint, Final Fantasy just kind of gives you stuff as you go. As you kind of level up, you just get access to these things. There isn't really trainers to talk to, recipes that drop. When Ishgardian Restoration dropped, you just clicked on that tab and it's just waiting for you. You don't have to go through an attunement type process, as opposed to WoW, where you have to ask each crafter, well, do you have the craft I need? That's great that you're a max level leather worker or enchanter or whatever, but do you have X? And those can be locked behind all kinds of things. A huge bulk of them, enough to level you, is locked behind trainers where they just purchase them outright and they're super easy, barely an inconvenience. And there is another set of them that come from world drops, raid drops, loot, dungeon drops, all these different things. And then they can call for ingredients that are crafted by various systems. So throughout different expansions, we've seen it different ways. It can be everything from drops off of things you kill to, different things that maybe other crafters make, or it can be, you grind down spare dungeon loot into a currency that's used. There's been all these different systems used, and that's kind of determined how WoW adds complexity, because the crafting itself, the actual act of crafting, is very, very flat. So adding complexity to the system has been entirely based around like the act of gathering resources, and the fact that you really can only pick two professions. That kind of restriction and that dynamic between the relationship that your character, that's only one class, has with the professions that it chooses. So we've had times where there's huge rate advantages to which professions you pick, so you almost feel forced into them, and it makes those other professions very rare. So it's definitely different, and I like seeing them learn from each other. I like seeing them say, hey, I like how the interaction between these things works. I don't want to copy them per se, but I want a similar interaction to take place between mine. So in-game, for example, relevant in-game content. WoW does a very good job of making crafting very relevant, to the point that they've actually had to nerf it a little bit because of some world first stuff that happened. I think that Final Fantasy could learn from that and say, is there a way to tie crafting more into the relic? They've done a lot with Ishgardian Restoration on kind of making it at least relevant to players who are at cap and done with story. Is there stuff we can do besides housing, glamour, and helping people level? Is there a value that a crafter can provide to people that are not into housing or glamour and have all their jobs at cap that they want to cap? And right now it's really tough to answer that. There's very little that crafters can do there. Yes, there's things like food and consumables and stuff, but for the most part, the crafting system really doesn't mean anything to somebody that feels like they're done leveling and isn't into the cosmetic systems, housing, and glamour. So it would be neat to see them kind of build something there. The other side of that is, you talk about kind of the way how you force that interaction. Well, having the recipes drop feeds into that, right? So having the recipe drop in the raid and then having that gear required items that drop in the raid allows you to then have that crafting recipe create an item that's appropriate for that tier. And there isn't really any way right now for 14 to add recipes that go to a tier without just immediately making them accessible to crafters that maybe don't raid. So it would be interesting to see them kind of learn from there. I think we're going to get a lot of changes to crafting and gathering this expansion. My initial thoughts is that they're too simple, but we know that there's another half to that story coming with 5.2. And so hopefully that is where they start to do some of the things they've promised, where they say they're going to target more difficult recipes. And I do think it would be interesting to talk about some of those recipes being harder to attain, and that you have to actually go out and do something. If you can create good PvP gear, maybe you should have to PvP to craft it. Maybe you shouldn't. I don't know. But it's definitely a thought worth exploring. RD, Meoni is awesome. Great to see him here. He is awesome. The auto gathering, from a selfish standpoint, I love it. I wonder if there's someone who gathers that does not like it. But looking at the direction of the game, I share worries with that Chris has. What is next? Auto path to quest, auto battle in the open world. By the way, Chris, stop messing with my crafting. Haven't they messed up enough with it? Don't give them ideas. Honestly, I laughed at a lot of all those crazy ideas. You think we saw the worst part of the community with Mail Vieira? Try locking relic weapon behind crafting. I think that in my mind, having Savage or Ultimate level gear come straight out of crafters, just straight up, is too far of a swing from where we are today. To kind of finish off our last comment here, but relic is that side progression, and so tying craftable items behind it, and then maybe those items are sellable on the market board or something like that, or there's a way of generating them for a server and they can be purchased or whatever, to kind of encourage that interaction where either you want to level up your crafting because it's never been easier, or you want to find a way to help somebody who's now engaging with the crafting system. Because it's great that we invited all these people into the crafting system by simplifying it, but if we don't give them something to do to continue to engage with it, all we did was simplify it, because them being at cap and then never doing it is worthless. It doesn't mean anything. The whole benefit of getting people caught up in crafting is that we have all these capped crafters. So finding a way to get them to want to continue crafting after the restoration is over, something that we could learn from and hopefully use in expansions to come, is something that I think would be really neat. I don't think that they need ideas from our videos, but if you are listening, Brian and I would be happy to share our thoughts, as would, I'm sure, several other YouTube creators. So it would be interesting to know kind of how many of our videos the devs watch, especially because it's a Japanese game and we speak English. Artemisian? Limited job system is not good. They just need to let all jobs do the same content. My fear of all fears is that we get forever. They get lost to obscurity due to the ability to. Limited job systems is not good. They need to just let all jobs do the same content. My fear is that they're going to be kind of locked to obscurity, because they are scared to stick with their design values. I'd rather have pup only DPS with one frame than pup as a limited job. So, limited jobs. I think I've stated my opinion on this before. I know people disagree. Let me try to explain a little more why. And I'll try to explain it a little differently than I have in the past, so that you can kind of build on that and either agree or disagree. So, when you have an MMO, Brian and I use the theme park analogy a lot, but when you have an MMO, you log in and you want to be able to do things, right? And so you have MSQ, you have raids, maybe you do Savage, maybe you do Ultimate, but eventually you either want to break from that because the people you do it with are not logged on, or you've finished everything you want to finish, or you just want to do something different, or you just like, it's been a long day, I just want to do something mindless. That game needs things for the mindless person, that mindless thing to do. There are whole people who only play this game for that aspect. They don't want the high tension. They don't do PvP, they don't do Savage, they don't do Ultimate. They clear their MSQ, and then they just focus on those other things, right? And maybe they're into RP, maybe they're into Glamour, maybe they're into doing old mount runs. Whatever it is, that content's out there for them. Golden Saucer is a huge hub of content like that. And adding to that is important. Adding new gates is important. Adding new triple triad cards is important. And adding new versions of that system is important. And so on its own, adding more side content is a good thing. And so the limited job system fits within that as another form of side content, because everything I just listed, maybe you don't like mounts, maybe you don't like mount runs, maybe you don't like Glamour, maybe you don't like housing, maybe and so like you want to have a huge breadth of side content, so that hopefully there's at least something for you when you go over to that buffet and look for something that fits what you're looking for casually. Maybe you're not into crafting and gathering, whatever it is. Ideally, the limited job system adds to that. Now, second of all, it's incredibly important for a game that doesn't have PTRs, that has a battle system as complex as it does, that they have a chance to explore alternate ideas, that they have a chance to say, well, what if? Because the content has to remain balanced in the primary mode. You don't want to screw the balance, especially for players that maybe only main that class, and that class suddenly becomes not good enough. Nobody's worried about being overpowered, but you don't want to be the class that's not invited to parties. So you want to leave it relatively balanced, where any of the tanks can swap out with any of the tanks. In content that only has one tank, you want to know that any of the tanks fit, which means they can only be so different than each other. Same with healers, same with DPS. So the chance to explore that has taken a couple of different forms. One of the big ones in the last expansion was Eureka. They got a chance to really screw with the battle system, and it totally lived inside Eureka. And for all the changes that they made to the way the battle system worked, at the end of it, at the end of Buildezian Arsenal, we go into the next expansion, Eureka is effectively gone. So if you didn't like Eureka, great news. There's no reason to do it outside of Glamour anymore. Mounts, whatever. It's totally cosmetic. It's gone. So that's great news. If you did like stuff about Eureka, I have more great news. They've said in interviews and panels and things like that they also liked some things about Eureka, and they will find a way to bring just those things forward. That's their goal. Take the good, leave the bad. So those side progression systems do that very well. Another great one is Deep Dungeon. Deep Dungeon actually really helps you gain experience by playing the game in a new and different way. Maybe you don't want to use extra side quests. Maybe you don't want to just run dungeons on that class, especially if it's a DPS. Maybe you don't want to do battle leaves, which eventually are no longer available after a certain point. Maybe you don't want to do hunts. You just want something different, something totally different, especially that has really cool glamour rewards behind it and gives experience. It's fun to do with friends. It's very arcade-like. No matter what level you're at and I'm at, we can both meet each other in Deep Dungeon, and it's a great deal of fun. That's an awesome system for that. But maybe you don't like Deep Dungeon. So adding more and more systems like that allow them to explore PvE differently in different ways and give different rewards for doing so is also very important to the health of the game. And Limited Job does satisfy that need. So the Limited Job system on its own, whether you like it or don't like it, if it gets removed, something has to fill that void, because we need ways for them to explore the future of PvE, and we need ways for them to provide content to people that don't want to do the main primary, greatest hits content, clearing your MSQ, leveling your jobs, clearing the dungeons and raids. You want something for people to do around that, and you want as many options as possible, because Final Fantasy is a big place. So that's kind of why there is an opening for the limited job system. Now, it didn't have to be the limited job system. It could have been anything, but there needed to be a form of content that's side progression. There needed to be a form of content that let them explore what the future of PvE can look like. Now, another thing around the same time is they've talked about adding classes to the game that people have long since requested, but the reason for not adding them is that A, either the engine didn't support it, or B, the battle system makes it hard to balance. So that's things like Puppet Master, Beast Master, Blue Mage, Onion Knight. I've heard possibly some people's descriptions of Geomancer. That one's not nearly as out there. A Time Mage that truly screws with time in a fight. There's a lot of interesting ideas that we want to add them to this game because we want to play them, but you can't balance them in that system. So finding a type of content where you can have them as a limited job where they get to go do their own thing satisfies that. It lets us introduce things into the game that Yoshi P and his team do not otherwise feel belong, and it gives a chance to explore that. So I understand that there's a need for the content and that certain classes' visions won't fit that. It is a bummer if that's your one dream. Like if I pick up this game and all I ever wanted to play Warrior, and Warrior ends up being a limited job in that game, it's a bummer because that affected me personally. So in my mind, the limited job system is not so much about the name. It's about the concept. It happened to be Blue Mage. It will likely happen to be, I don't know, let's guess Puppet Master next. So it's a bummer that it had to be the class you wanted, but just be aware it did have to be a class. And no matter what class they picked, somebody wanted to play that class as a standard job. And adding it only as a standard job and not having the limited job system at all means that there is a gap in more ways for them to explore PvE in new and different ways. The things they did with the limited job system, they could not have done with a relic grind, and they could not have done with a standard take any class into it and have experience gains of the deep dungeon. So it gave them a chance to explore alternate ways to go out in the world and get skills and level, and it's neat. It's a bummer it's not longer. It's a bummer it's not more. There are things about Blue Mage content that I wish were different, but the concept is neat. And so I just wanted to kind of explain, that's why I like limited job as a concept, even if the implementation is not perfect. Itachu. Good to have content back in the game. Literally every few months we get content. Those words need to end. So it's hard to build content the rate we consume it. That's another reason that side content is incredibly important. That's another reason that having systems like Relic and Deep Dungeon and Limited Jobs and Golden Saucer and hunts and fates and all of these things need to exist because it gives us something to do. Beast Tribes is another great example. It gives us something to do to fill those months. But if some of those things are not for you, say there's 10 things to do in a game, and those 10 things would take you the amount of time you play, but then you say, I don't like 3 of them, you're suddenly in a gap. So they have to make 13 things to fill that. But then out of those 13, you don't like 5 of them. And so getting to your 10 takes them building a whole lot more than 10 because they got to get to everybody's 10, especially for players that have more time versus less time. They have to account for that. Some people only have time for 3. So you have to have 3 things that fulfill that player that only take that amount of time. Then you have to have things for the player that likes 25 things. So it just takes a lot of things to satisfy this game. I will say 5.0 and 5.1 have been huge, enormous amounts of content. So if you say you are done with Final Fantasy, it is because you are done with the things you want to do, not because you completed the game. It is enormous. I mean, if you just want one thing that would take a ridiculous number of hours, just go catch all of the big fish. There's 204 of them or something now? Just go catch them. I'll see you next year. Go get old mounts. Go get all the Blue Mage skills. My God, some of those are really hard. I know they're making the drop rates easier and everything. Level all your jobs. Go turn in 5,000 collectibles or whatever that achievement is. So there's a ton of stuff if you're just looking for something to do. The question is there something you want to do that you want to do? That's the bigger question. And YouTube guy. I think the worst part of concerted work fates is it's literally go pick up a log, take it over here, and do one thing, and you're done. All of the work that everyone puts in to fill that bar, and that's the best event you can come up with. So Yoshi P addressed this, and he said, we wanted the initial content to be about welcoming in players who've never crafted and gathered before. And that inherently means that people who know how to do more complex things aren't the focus. So they're going to get left behind. So we welcome all these new players in. So we dumb down the crafting system and gathering system to the point that it is more palatable and more bearable to people who have clearly chosen not to do it to this point. And so that means that the concerted works are simple. That means that crafting and gathering is simple. He has said that, and I'm with you, I want that complexity in my side content systems. A decent change is just such a bummer to me. So from there, they say that, it's going to get more complex. So the concerted works and all that. Right now, we're building the firmament. We're building the easiest part, and it's going to get more complex from here. So I would say, your feelings are valid. They're very fair, but hopefully they're not kind of ruining your day, and they're not like taking over all your thoughts. They're just a thought that passes, and they're able to keep that kind of open mind and, don't hold your breath, but kind of plan on there being more. Kind of don't let that. On one hand, I want to say, don't let that version of the future get so big that now no matter what they come out with, it lets you down. But I am saying, they're not done. So don't stop listening. Don't stop giving them a chance to finish this thought, especially because Shadowbringers has been so good. Yoshi P and his team have been so good in general. And if I can point out anything, point out that there is no way we could have predicted Baldezi and Arsenal when we first got news that Eureka was delayed right out of the gate, and it was such a drastic, controversial type of content right out of the gate, and there were plenty of people who didn't like it, and then it turned into something really, really different, and so I would give this a chance to turn into something different. So while I will continue to put out videos as there are things that I don't like about this game, I will also put out videos about things I do like about this game, and my overall voice will be, yes, concerns are something we need to leverage along the way. That's what tells them to, continue fine-tuning. But when you get those concerns out there, give them a chance to fix them. Give them a chance to correct for the things. And they have heard us, and they have made changes, even on the fly recently, where they do listen. So just because they don't get something the way we want it the first time doesn't mean that they're not set to do it already, or that they wouldn't change to doing it once they hear kind of our thoughts and impressions. And that is really it, guys. That is my overall thoughts on kind of some of the comments around the podcast. The podcast has been an incredibly fun thing to do more of this year. We are I think we might have one more guest this year. Maybe, I don't know, maybe two. It's hard to do around the holidays. So if we are done for the year, we're done. But if not, definitely keep an eye out for those. The goal was to do those once a week in 2019 for the most part, and we did do a lot of podcasts this year compared to the past, and so it's been great to have a variety of creators on there. Once again, keep letting us know what creators you'd like us to invite. Some we're already in discussions with, some we're not. Sometimes you guys are introducing us to creators for the first time. Others, it's like, oh my gosh, they're awesome. So it's been really neat to see the names suggested. And it's blown us away, some of the people who have chosen to come on and some of the people who said that they're interested in coming on in the future. And we look forward to doing more of that. Let us know kind of if you think we should do more podcasts, less podcasts, what you think about the length. We'll continue to kind of take that under advisement as we fine tune the format. We're starting to feel relatively happy with it. But any advice and comments is something that we will at least hear out. And as we try to kind of fine tune it into something that we can really think of as like a finished thought. This channel's gone through so many changes, and that's something that I think we're getting to a point where we just want for the foreseeable future there to be this podcast at a consistent pace that is the same thing. Every time you click on it, you know what you're getting, and for the people that like that, it's something that they really enjoy. And I can only hope that we find other aspects of the channel that are able to kind of settle on a format there that really works well for them and allows them to kind of become something that you can expect to like, instead of clicking on the video and going, oh, I hope these guys don't screw this one up. So hopefully you guys are enjoying it. Definitely go over there, subscribe to Meoni. He is absolutely wonderful, and he said the guy plays with like 6 seconds of lag. It's impressive he clears anything, but I think it might be possible for him to have better internet in the year. He gives so much of his personal time to this community. Right now he has to drive into town to upload videos and shenanigans. We would be lucky to have more like him. So thank you, Meoni, for being a guest. Thank you, Meoni, for being a 14 creator. We need more, not less. More. And it's been a great time with the podcast in general, and I can't wait to do more of it. My name's Chris with Work to Game. Have a fantastic day. Keep leaving all these comments. It's why Brian and I do this. Take care, and I'll see you next time.
We really appreciate you watching. We really, really, really do. We really appreciate you watching. We really, really do. A 30-second end screen is so long. I don't know how to fill all this time.